Now, to say that we were, and I've heard some wild theories, like people think that, humanity was seeded by UFOs, and that's I don't agree with that theory.
Sounds like the Anunnaki to me.
I'm going to address it because
it's a fun one.
It's an interesting theory.
If you found out it was true, would you tell everybody?
I mean, I'd be transparent about it, but I just don't personally believe it.
But would you believe it if you found out that was the information that the government had?
Well, I'd put it out there because that's what I'm
right. But what
to
would that do for your belief system?
That would suck.
But would it suck, really? But maybe that's what's confusing about the Bible. Maybe what's confusing is that it was an oral tradition for hundreds, if not 1,000 years before it was ever written down, right?
Well, I think that it depends on what book you're talking about, right? So,
but I
if you
mean,
have
the
books
Old
written by
Testament,
prophets,
if you go back to the oldest works of the Bible, weren't most of those stories handed down generation after generation and then eventually written down?
Written into text. Well, some of them are written by prophets, but I
Right.
mean, Enoch is apparently supposed to predate even the time of Genesis and talk.
The nuttiest one is Ezekiel.
I'm telling you, Enoch is even crazier than Ezekiel.
Oh, I've read it. I just don't. Did you find anything about whether or not Enoch is controversial?
You can look up the 4th century.
It was discluded as, I guess, since the 5th century. It wasn't in canon.
Sorry, 5th century.
And why did it get discluded?
It says the Jewish scribes or the priests didn't believe, the rabbis didn't believe it was canon.
Huh.
So it's regarded as scripture.
But what's interesting is that even if that's the case, though, you have the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that actually there's Ethiopian Jews, and that's considered the most pure form of the Bible. So
Nobody believes the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible is the purest form of the Bible other than Ethiopians, FYI. This is a really subjective statement, to say the least.
you actually have a division of the Ethiopian Jewish class that actually recognized Enoch.
How weird is it that some rabbis 500 years ago made a call?
But that's what I'm saying is you
1,500 years ago,
can't though discredit it because
that's kind of weird.
But you can't discredit it because, again, when you have people removing books, I think, look, and I'm not telling people what to believe. I'm just saying you should take a look at it. And so it's interesting because then you have, the evolution of what the King James Bible is. We all know that story. He wanted to get remarried. They rewrote it. But you even have the Catholic Bible that has, it's what happened.
Right.
And you have the Catholic Bible that had books that were taken out. And then we have the King James. So I'm not saying that, if you read the King James, you're not getting, you don't have access to God. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that there's a bigger picture here that we need to discuss. And I think
there's always a problem when people get involved. And when people get involved in making decisions that this could be real and this could not be. The problem is, all these years later, you're dealing with the repercussions of that. Imagine a world in which if Enoch was left in the Bible and people were like, wait, what happened? Explain the nuttiness of the Book of Enoch to people.
Well, it's okay. So if you read it, it talks about the fall of angels, thus creating really the precursor of civilization that led to the first flood. I think that when you even go into potentially the technology that was given to mankind by these angels, it talks about the hidden beliefs and theories in astronomy, etc., metalworkings, all of it. But it really does explain, you were talking about earlier how you have a lot of these religions around the world that kind of say the same thing. This is kind of the OG text that leads to those stories that we're hearing from many religions around the world. To talk about angels mixing with mankind and then seeding a super essentially race of humans that essentially were responsible for basically damning mankind to the flood. I mean, you hear about stuff in Greek and Roman mythology, people who had these super crazy powers. And you talk about it out loud and it sounds crazy, but that's what the book says. And then the fact that it was taken out and then it's poo-pooed, yet you have one of the oldest religions in the world via the Ethiopians that actually still have it. You have, the Catholic Church that has books that are missing out of the King James Version. I'm just saying that, when you read it, you should read it and decide for yourself. Don't listen to what I'm saying. Don't listen to what you're saying, but truly give it a chance and see what you have to say. And then, you're going back to this whole concept of if you have this information pertaining to UAPs, whatever they might be, the origins. I mean, if you have a understanding of what Enoch was talking about, kind of makes sense.
Well, I go back to my thoughts on all this stuff. It's very few people could even read back then. Very few people could write, right? So you're not going to write. You're probably going to try to capture a truth. You're probably not writing necessarily to deceive people and make up a story. So the question is, with all this stuff, is like, what was the original truth that they were trying to write down, and how much of it is getting distorted by translations from ancient Hebrew to Latin to
Or
Greek?
Aramaic to
yeah,
English.
like how much of it?
And there's this
and
thing-
is it possible to even understand what they're saying without understanding the language? And my friend Rick Strassman, he's a very fascinating guy, but brilliant guy. One of the things that he did is he taught himself ancient Hebrew so he could read the Bible in ancient Hebrew. It took him 16 years.
Wow.
But he did it because, like, I want to know it in that language.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
smart because there's always an aspect of translation where you lose
Sure.
certain implications.
If you're playing the telephone game, you want to be second. You
Yeah,
don't want to be 15th.
Exactly.
Right? And whoever was writing it down the earliest, that's probably you're closer to their depictions of what that truth is than after King James starts fucking around with it and all these
Want
other
a new
people,
wife, gotta remove
all
certain
these
stuff.
new people start getting involved. But boy, when you go to the really old stuff, you know, the really old stuff is very strange.
I'm telling you, the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, I actually had a staffer that went to Ethiopia. She was on a church trip, and she actually brought me back a copy, and she's like, you can translate it via Google Translation, so kudos to modern day technology. So I have it in my office, and actually when I did my swearing in, I actually did my swearing in on the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible.
Wow.
It's cool. It's direct translation.
That's kind of crazy.
I think we're probably going to be responsible for like the Book of Enoch sales probably increasing on Amazon.
Well, I'm going to buy it. I'm
Good.
going to buy it. I need to read it now. I'm in the middle of the audiobook of the Book of Enoch, and it's one of the wildest things I've ever listened to in my life.
It's weird.
Oh my God, it's so weird. When you realize that a lot of the people in the Book of Enoch are also in the Bible, and that it's one of the craziest stories. It's one of the craziest origin stories ever, that angels came down and bred with humans and made giants.
Right.
The giants destroyed the earth. Like, what is this story?
It's mostly in the Hebrew Bible. You know, it's the story of what led to the flood. Yeah, the sons of Elohim.
How do you interpret the Watchers? What do you think that could be?
I think, well, they're not mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. They are mentioned in the Book of Enoch. That's a crazy book, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Yeah, I started reading it, and I said to my wife, I can't handle this. It's too much.
It's because if that was left in the Bible, if they decided that that was like a part of the canon, that would change everything.
Well, in what way?
It's the craziest story ever. That these things came down and bred with humans and created giants, and the giants destroyed and consumed everything
Yeah, those giants.
and consumed each other. Like,
Yeah, bloodshed.
what kind of kooky story is this? Like, what is this?
Well, it's the reason for the flood, you know,
Right.
and all that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, things just got so bad, God said, I changed my mind. And he brings the flood.
When you hear about these biblical depictions of fantastic events, how many of them are you attributing to a psychedelic experience? Are you open to that, or do you just not worry?
Well, they're clearly a psychedelic experience. The Book of Enoch is just fully psychedelic. I mean,
Right.
at least a lot of it is. Yeah. It's a psychedelic version of the Bible in some ways. Well, it is really psychedelic. I think it's from the release of endogenous DMT. It comes about, or from drinking and having an ayahuasca-like experience.
That's what you think the origin of the Book of Enoch is?
Well, it's a psychedelic experience. It might be a prophetic state that's brought about. It's a visionary state, clearly. Might have been a huge fever dream. I mean, he was really out there.
These things are happening in an alternative dimension.
Right. Yeah, I think they're happening in an alternative dimension. Like when you smoke DMT, you return to the same place each time. So there seems to be some reality, some DMT world that people enter into. In that same manner, the world of the Hebrew Bible early on, Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, Noah, the Tower of Babel, all that took place at some different level of reality, which gradually made its way into ours. And once it made its way into ours, there's the archaeological evidence, the first temple, second temple, and so on. So there is a transition between, our world and that world kind of merged. But in the beginning, it was an alternative dimension. It's the same God, I think, but different dimensions.
So, is this your own personal conclusion?
Yeah. Well, when I was on the show last time, you're asking if I believe those things took place, and my answer then was I take it as if it were true,
Right.
and then I started to think, how I would do that, like in what world would that be true? It'd be a different world.
Right. I've always believed that they were trying to record something. I just didn't always trust that human beings were completely honest with their recollection of events, so that there's something that they were trying to write down. But was it really coming from God? Are these accurate events? What exactly happened with Noah and the ark?
Mm-hmm.
What really happened?
Well, 3 stories, three levels,
Mm-hmm.
2 of each.
Yeah, but like, how's he feeding them? Animals eat other animals. The whole thing's nuts. You would need a lot more rabbits. You need so many animals to keep just the lions alive.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. How's he getting them all from all over the world into his stupid boat?
Yeah.
There's so many things that are wrong. What do you think was going on with that story? Like, what is the origin of the story of Noah and his ark and his family and all the animals on the boat?
Yeah. Well, I think it was taking place in that alternate universe. It may have taken place on the planet. I don't know. I'm, looking at, why we don't have any clear archaeological history story, about what happened during the time of Noah, if there was a time of Noah. It's useful because Noah came from Adam and Eve, and he and Noah and his family were the only survivors of the flood. The first thing Noah did, got drunk after the flood.
The first thing.
The first thing he did, he planted a vineyard, grapevine, drank, got drunk. He exposed himself in the tent. One of his grandkids reported it and made a laughingstock of him.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. Poor Noah. He got canceled? Noah got canceled?
Yeah. Took off his clothes.
Really?
Drunk.
Wasn't he like 600 years old, too?
He has first child at 600, I think.
That seems
right?
real.
Well, he may have lived 600. A lot of people wonder, why did people live, in the Bible anyway?
Right.
How did people live 900 years? Well, they did.
Right. But that's also why people question what the origin of the story is. That's why. Can you hear things like that? You're like, wait a minute, how old was he? 600 years old? Come on, man.
His first child.
This is just a regular dude.
Yeah.
His first kid when he was 600.
The last one he was 830 or so.
That seems logical.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Why are you laughing?
Maybe.
Really, it could
Listen,
be true. Why not?
If people lived normally to be 600, would that be any weirder than living to be 100? No. Like, what if something happened? What if something happened and our lifespan just went... Brrr.
Yeah. Well, the final species of man lives 35,000 years.
Jeez Louise. That's a long time to be in a bad relationship. Imagine 35,000 years of getting yelled at.
Well, they... that would be bad. But
I mean, I'm saying 35,000 years would be awesome if you have great friends and your life is together. But can you imagine 35,000 years of fuck this place? That would get tired.
Well, the point that those people tried to attain when they lived 35,000 years was this group telepathy of around the whole planet.
Neuralink.
Right.
Yeah.
That was their goal.
Wesley
The Book of
Huff.
Enoch is nuts. I
That's
talked
the
to Wes
Giants
Huff about
one.
it.
That's the Giants
It's
one,
not
right?
just the Giants, it's aliens. It's about the Watchers who came down and mated with human beings. Bro, I'm reading it right now.
I know you are. I
It's
already know.
bananas. She told me to read it. And she's like, you have to read this. It's nuts.
And what did Wes Huff say? Did he say there's a legitimacy?
It's 100% of legitimate text. It's legitimate religious text, but they decided not to include it because it's so nuts and because it goes against like what the writings of the Torah.
Right, right.
So, but it was a few rabbis. Just a few rabbis decided.
That nixed
like
it.
if the Book of Enoch was included in the Bible, it changes the whole
Why would the
story of the
rabbis
human
decide
race.
what goes into
back
the
then
Christian?
they had that kind of power. They just decided that it doesn't get included in the canon. This is a long time ago.
But yeah, I mean, this is like around. Well, who decided the canonized Bible, right? This is like Constantine time, right?
Well, that's for the New Testament, right? And so with the Old Testament, you've got Wes Huff would be the guy to ask
Oh, wait a
all
minute.
these
Enoch
questions.
was incled in the Old
Oh,
Testament.
it's old as fuck.
Oh, okay, got
Not only
got
is it
got
old
got
as
got
fuck, when they found it, they also found a version of the Book of Isaiah. This is one of the things that Wes Huff told me that was really fascinating. They found a version of the Book of Isaiah that is verbatim the same as a version of Isaiah that was 1,000 years later, which they thought was the original.
Unbelievable.
That's what's crazy.
Unbelievable.
For 1,000
maintain that.
years, they maintained the exact same story verbatim, writing it down and passing it on. And the Book of Enoch's in there with that. And the Book of Enoch is bananas.
Yeah, I think we might need to do a little deep dive on the Book of Enoch.
The Book of Enoch, it says that these Watchers came down and mated with human beings and created a race of giants called the Nephilim who consumed and destroyed everything in front of them. Gee, that sounds like people. That sounds a lot like people.
Yeah.
If you got a bunch of little chimps and then you got these tall aliens and they make a fucking 7-foot man, a Viking, who's like chopping off heads and lighting villages on fire and has this unstoppable desire for conquest, that's humans. The Nephilim sounds like humans.
Exactly. So they're not giants. We are the giants. And then what if the other folks...
They might have been giants. Like, it's hard to say.
But what if the other folks were the Neanderthals? Well, because there was a time where we're living together, right?
Right. Well, they were here before us, allegedly. Well, the question is like, where did humans come from?
Yeah.
This is the real question. There's a really interesting show on PBS right now called Human, where this lady goes on this journey of, it's like, she's, what is her degree in? Is she an anthropologist? I believe she's an anthropologist. But or maybe some sort of biologist, but she goes over the history of the human species. It's very interesting. The migration from across the Bering Land Bridge into North America, when the oldest people started coming here, how they came here. Fascinating stuff. But that's one of those things, like if you think ancient history is filled with horseshit, like ancient human history, like of the humans. That's the woman's name. I don't want to fuck up her name. Ella al-Shamahi. And it's on BBC and PBS. Really good show. I just started watching it. She's a paleontologist. Degree in genetics and taxonomy and biodiversity. But they just found recently a human skull that pushes the date of humans back another 500,000 years.
Yeah.
So it's like all they know is what they find in the fossil record, and there's so little fossil record. And then they keep finding new things. Like they just found Denisovans in like 2010. They're like, whoa,
what is that?
What's this? Total new branch of the human tree.
It's called
Denisovans.
Denisovans.
Yeah,
Okay.
they found like a bunch of teeth, I think, in Asia, and they're like, what the fuck is this? And then or maybe it was Russia. So there's that. There's the one that they found in China, the big head people.
That's the one that I
real
saw.
recent.
Yeah.
That's real recent. I forget what that one's called. We've done this a million times, but I always forget. But so they're always finding these new versions of humans. So how many of them really were there? But if there's a bunch of science experiments, if aliens are coming down and like, let's try them where they're short and really powerful and they only eat meat. And that's Neanderthals. Like, stop. This one's not a good design. This is not a good design. We need them a little more frail so they invent things.
Yeah.
Because the brutes don't invent anything.
Yeah, more frontal cortex.
Yeah, the Neanderthals had bigger brains than us. That's what's interesting.
So then what part of our brain was specifically different?
See, we have a very our idea of them is that they were dumb and they couldn't talk and that they were brutes. But it doesn't seem like that's true. In fact, it seems like they had art, they definitely had tools, and they had language. And they might have been as smart as us. They were just different. And maybe us being a little weaker is what made us smarter. You know?
Or made us work collectively.
Maybe we're a little more alien, just a touch.
Right.
There's a little too much salt in that stew. Let's add a touch more of us. And, you know, it seems like the hairy, 5'7", 200-pound fucking savages with big eyes that might be able to see at night, because it looks like they might have had night vision. They have huge eyeballs, man.
Right.
The Neanderthal eye socket's way bigger than ours. Their skull's thicker. Their bones are more dense. They might have had night vision, like a dog. You know how dogs, their eyes glow when the headlights hit them? They might have had that same ability.
I mean, I don't know why.
That design's too sketchy.
It's just not
They
working.
can see at night,
Yeah.
and then they go hunting other people. This is too much.
But then we hunted them.
Maybe. We might have just fucked them.
I also heard we fucked them.
Well, I think
you
we
had that
hunted them and
joke,
we
right?
fucked
You're
them.
like, I got a little bit of... Yeah.
One more time with the monkey.
But in terms of, like, the stories, like... All right, you know when a comic gets off stage and, like, they think they killed, but they bombed?
Right.
Like, there could be people telling those stories in the books.
There could be.
Like, meaning what their rendition of what happened is in the book, and that is what they truly believed happened. They might not even be delusional. They are delusional, but, like, that's what they saw, and that's what happened to them.
And history is always written by the winners.
Exactly.
Yeah. My version of the Bible story back in the day, I used to have this bit about Noah's Ark. I was like, the problem with the Bible is people are full of shit, and that story sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's that simple. It's
Yeah.
like people lie all the time. I've never met any politician or any person who's in charge of anything that's like really important that I would say never lies. So if you're back then where there's zero accountability, zero video, zero anything, they can't even write.
Well, that's where the cross-referencing makes sense, right? It's like that's when you got a bunch of different people saying the same thing or similar things. You start to go, okay, maybe this did happen.
I had Rep Luna on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And she was the one who really got me to read the Book of Enoch.
Dude, she's digging in.
Oh, yeah.
She's digging in. Yeah.
She's all in on the UFOs.
I know she is.
I don't know what they tell her.
Yeah.
I mean, is she useful to them? You know, it's the whole thing is weird.
Maybe. It's hard to know.
But when I started reading it, now, if that was included in the Bible, if they had, because it really was rabbis that decided that it didn't jive with the Torah, right?
Right.
And so they said, no, this one's
Can't
too
have
crazy.
this, yeah.
If that was in the Bible, and that's what we were taught,
Things would be different.
can you imagine like
Things would
Sunday
be
church,
different,
the
bro.
Watchers came down and made it. But meanwhile, that is in the same area of Qumran, written down as the Book of Isaiah. So all these things that are included in the Bible, that's there. It's all in the same word. Why are we ignoring some of it? Like, that's really crazy. Why ignoring the stuff that seems the most kooky?
I think that there's probably maybe disagreements because, I mean, there's so much change for the biblical canon from all of these different, councils, like the Council of Nicaea, all these different censorings and changing of the Bible. It's probably personal issue. It could be something as simple as just someone who personally did not believe that. It's like, that's bullshit. Remove that. That's not real. There's no way there were giants. But I love how at the beginning of the Bible, it's like there were giants in those times and the times before.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All over
Moving
the
on,
Bible.
never mention it again, in any sort of real context other than David and Goliath in a few situations. But no, I really am starting to wonder if there was a giant race that was on this planet,
there was.
dude. I really do.
The Native American depictions alone.
Yeah.
There's too many stories of enormous men that they had to kill.
Yeah. And their history, their oral tradition goes so far back.
Yeah, I mean, imagine we're talking 10,000.
Yeah.
Now that we know that human beings lived in North America 22,000 plus years ago, right? So the fossilized footprints that they found in New Mexico, so that's 22,000 years. So imagine if 22,000 years ago these things were a real thing. How many of them have you found? You haven't found any bones of humans from 22,000 years ago in North America, have you? No, right? So why?
Exactly.
Does the Smithsonian have them, these motherfuckers? If they really do have a giant down there, can you imagine?
I think they probably do, Joe.
Can you imagine if there's there's a tomb that you have to go into? It's like a vault. The guy cranks open the vault.
It's like the history version of Area 51.
You see a fucking head the size of this table, and you're like, what?
That's what we're dealing with. That's what we're dealing with. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had to kill him off.
Maybe.
Which totally makes sense. Why
Yeah.
would you let that motherfucker live?
Right.
You got a 10-foot tall, 12-foot tall,
That's a problem.
2,000-pound human that eats people.
That is a problem. I wonder, I always get this because, like, the Watchers themselves are never described as giant beings.
Right.
I wonder where the giant came into the equation.
Well, isn't it us
genetically.
compared to them?
Maybe,
Let's
because
look at
maybe
this.
there were slight aliens, like alien greys or
Sure.
something, and
Well, look at the description of the Nephilim, how they destroyed everything.
Yeah.
Like, they created this thing that consumed everything, destroyed everything, including mankind. Like, what does that sound like?
It sounds like us.
Sounds like us.
It sounds like us.
Right. And also, like, you're saying mankind. Like, mankind, what are you saying? Are you saying aliens? Are you saying, who wrote this?
Yeah.
Like, what
Yeah,
is
yeah,
mankind?
for
Like,
sure.
what does that term mean? I bet you're not saying man. I bet you're probably using an ancient language to describe whatever the dominant force was at the time that's writing all this down. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
What is these Watchers? They mated with humans? So what are they? And they created something that destroyed everything? What? So, okay. What is that? What are you talking about? And doesn't that sound exactly like humans? Like, what do? We fucking destroy everything.
Yeah.
We destroy everything. We light things on fire. We suck all the fish out of the ocean. We throw our garbage in it. We are so destructive.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're so consuming. We consume. We're one of the only animals that dies because we eat too much.
Yeah. Right.
Right? We're one of the only animals.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we're one of the only. We are the only example on this planet of the level of intelligence that we have. I mean, it's just phenomenal. I mean, really quite phenomenal when you consider all of the various avenues of evolution that have been given the opportunity.
We have a massive leap.
Phenomenally, but a leap that has to in some way have been intervened with, in my opinion. I mean, it's such a quantum leap in our ability of cognition and the brain size. I mean, I do find the stoned ape theory very interesting, and the concept of using psychedelics, and I think there's a role to play in that for sure. But I just think that when you have such a novel trajectory change from every other creature, every other animal on this planet, that tells me that there is something fundamentally accelerated in humans. And whether that can just be put down to shamanic use of psychedelics, I don't know. I think that when you invoke, again, all of these various theologic stories, it becomes clear that something was interfacing with us. And perhaps at one point, we were interfacing with them. And there was a communication and a relation that has since long degraded after, cataclysmic outreaches and.
I think the evolution that came out of psychedelics and primitive man was the escape from the barbaric nature of our roots.
Right.
I don't think it's necessarily the development of the human brain. I think it's probably
Communal
a way
values
to,
and
well, also a way
societal.
to use the human brain with its primate background, but soften the ego.
Right. Yeah.
And endorse a feeling of community. And promote a feeling of community and love and the connectiveness that you get from psychedelics. So it will allow you to traverse the timelines between incredibly barbaric hunter-gatherers with stone-tipped tools to agrarian societies where people are all living together and cooperating, and it makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is the giant leap to being a human in the first place.
No.
It's kooky.
It is,
and
kooky.
It's in the Bible. At least it's in the Book of Enoch.
It's
that's
there.
The crazy part about it is that they literally describe what we're, and not just us. Like many people have theorized. Like, have we been a product? Are we a product of genetic manipulation? Are we a product of accelerated evolution?
Well, again, my own experiences, I just feel like there is quite obviously a vast intelligence spectrum out there, in my opinion, and I think it goes beyond our own perception of space and time, and I think that there are likely things that can come in from realms that we just don't really believe are real, like the astral and even the realm of the imagination is an interesting thing. What is this place inside of our heads that we can instantaneously create anything we want, and all things, including everything on this table, once came from inside someone's mind? Like, we are excretors of ideas into reality. We kind of render reality into something that nothing else does.
This means repentance. It means changing your mind. It doesn't mean to actually do things. And then you read Genesis chapter 1 and it says, in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth and he makes it good. But ultimately, I would ascribe to there being an original Adam and Eve, and that those are our, if you want to call them our first parents kind of thing. Yeah. And I say, well, if the first miracle happened, if everything, nothing became everything, then, Jesus turning water into wine.
That's a easy one.
Well, yeah.
That's a party trick.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is nothing compared to the birth of the universe. But at the end of the day, you have one miracle. So what is your personal belief when it comes to the resurrection?
How do you explain it going from 11 scared disciples in an upper room to being willing to go out and die for the proclamation that you believe that Jesus rose from the dead, and you saw him and you touched him and you ate with him? In all of this, what do you think of Jesus?
Wow. That's unbelievable. Wow. That's so fascinating.
So Joe Rogan just interviewed Wes Huff, who went viral after exposing Billy Carson as a fraud. I watched the entire interview and want to share some of the highlights, including Wes sharing the Christian message with Joe. Joe Rogan first heard of Wes Huff because of Wes's now infamous debate with Billy Carson.
So I, like many people, was introduced to you because of the debate that you had with Billy Carson.
Quote unquote.
It's one of those things where it's very unfortunate when people get caught with their pants down. And I'm not an expert in many things, but the things that I am an expert on, you could wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning and ask me about those things. It seems like he does not have that. When he was on with you, it was quite apparent that you are an actual expert in the Bible and in many religious texts. He didn't necessarily have the facts straight.
Wes then mentions how little preparation he had actually done for the debate, and how he was so easily able to respond to everything Billy said with so little preparation.
Well, it's interesting you say the expert thing, because I literally was asked to do it 24 hours beforehand. So I had like the least amount of preparation going into it, and I was okay with that. Well, and I listened to the stuff he'd said, so I knew enough about the ways that he'd articulated.
Wes then talks about Billy's threats after the debate.
But the fallout was that not only did he not want us to release the conversation, but then he started throwing out cease and desist letters, and then he started, trying to sue people.
Wes then shares how ridiculous Billy's cease and desist letter was.
The cease and desist letter said, I don't want you to use my name or my face in anything going forward, and anything you've used up until this point you need to remove.
Wes then says that Billy's actions are really what made this story go viral in the first place.
Well, the irony of this situation is if he just kind of left it, it probably wouldn't have made anywhere close to the splash that it's made. And we told him that.
Wes points out that when you're dealing with these kinds of topics, it gets pretty obvious really quickly who does and doesn't know what they are talking about.
But when you start to get into like linguistics and philology, it gets messy. And if you don't know what you're talking about, it gets really apparent really fast.
Wes then shares how the debate was set up in the first place, in a way that wasn't even malicious at all.
Mark told me, he's like, I've been hearing Billy say, he wants to debate, nobody will debate him for years. And so as far as I think Mark was concerned, he was giving Billy the opportunity that Billy had told a lot of people he wanted.
And here's the reason Wes ended up stepping in for Mark to talk to Billy at the last minute.
Mark, very last minute, was like, well, I feel inadequate. Do you think I could just ask Wes? And so he DM'd me on Instagram.
Joe then asks if Billy knew what the conversation with Wes would be about, and Wes said that Billy fully knew.
Was Billy aware that this was going to be a debate, or did he think it was going to be just a discussion? Like, what did he think it was going to be?
No, he'd been given all of the prerequisites, and that part of the conversation was going to be me kind of asking him some clarifying questions and rebutting some of the things that he said.
Now Wes points out Billy's lies about the debate.
So unfortunately, Billy there says he had no idea going in. And I mean, as Mark said in his video that he released yesterday, I mean, that's patently false.
Throughout this interview, Joe seems to mainly feel sorry for Billy, but Joe is glad he was able to meet Wes because of all of this.
But the good part of it is I was introduced to you and your work. And
there you go.
Very, very extensive and very fascinating.
Wes then shares part of his story, which is pretty amazing.
Just before my 12th birthday, I actually was diagnosed with a neurological condition that left me paralyzed from the waist down.
Yeah, I did see all that.
Despite a high likelihood that Wes would suffer from this condition for the rest of his life, Wes somehow completely recovered from his paralysis.
1 month from the day that I woke up and couldn't feel my legs, I woke up on a Saturday morning, got out of bed, walked over to my wheelchair and sat down.
1 month.
1 month, yeah. January 8th to February 8th, exactly.
Very fortunate.
Wes attributes his healing to something supernatural.
Yeah, but going back to that, like, so I experienced this, what I consider to be a true supernatural experience.
Wes said that even the doctors called his recovery a miracle.
To the doctors that had overseen me, and they were the first ones that used the word miracle. They said, we really don't have any type of medical explanation.
And Joe says that something about Wes's recovery seems pretty incredible.
That's crazy. Because I've broken limbs before and had them in casts, and just in the 6 weeks that you have a cast on, you have massive atrophy.
Yeah.
Wes then says that after reading and studying a lot, he came to the conclusion that Christianity is true.
At the end of that, I did truly feel that, okay, well, I think in the ways that in my limited ability as a teenager, to investigate these things, I think that Christianity is true.
Joe then talks about how impressed he is with Wes's knowledge about the Bible.
Because I'm always fascinated by people that have really gone down the road, like really, really, really gone down the road, because you don't meet a whole lot of them. You know, how old are you?
I'm 33.
Which is very young for someone who
Spring
has
chicken.
The depth of knowledge that you have.
Joe has come a long way from before, when he thought the Bible was absolutely ridiculous. Now Joe seems to have at least some respect for the Bible, and for people who know the Bible well. Wes then talks about the importance of being able to defend the truth of the Bible that he said he believed in.
If the things they were saying about the Bible were true, then it did actually legitimately undermine what I believed. And so I needed to take that seriously. I had an obligation. If I'm wrong about the Bible,
Joe seemed to be genuinely interested in learning more about biblical manuscripts, especially the Dead Sea Scrolls, which Wes is an expert on.
So when you say the book of Isaiah is intact, how similar is it to the book of Isaiah that's in the Bible?
So that one is fascinating. So
Joe says that he likes Billy Carson, but he also thinks truth is important.
Listen, I like Billy. He was a nice guy. I really enjoyed talking to him. I really do. I think his videos are fun. But I also think truth is important.
Here's where Wes found an opportunity to share part of the Christian message about repentance with Joe Rogan.
And the church was using this as like, you need to do penance. You need to, do all of this stuff to show that you're sorry. And part of that was, paying the church. And Luther reads this and he goes, hey, guys, this means something different. This means repentance. It means changing your mind. It doesn't mean like to actually do things.
Here's more of Joe being impressed with the kind of hard work involved with what Wes is doing.
God, when you're saying this about taking copied versions of it and comparing errors and going back, and like, you're talking about so much time.
Yeah.
So much research.
It's legwork.
So much legwork.
Later, Joe talks about how fascinated he is by the question of our origins.
The search for our origins is one of the most human endeavors. One of the most, because to know that we are particularly unique. We're so different. We stand out from every other animal on this planet.
And in response to Joe, Wes talks about the uniqueness of the book of Genesis in the Bible.
And that's why you see, but then you can see that the author of Genesis is making these points that are actually rebutting something like the origin stories of the surrounding cultures.
Wes says that other ancient civilizations thought everything was just chance.
And one of the main themes was basically that, like, it's all chance. It's all a random mistake. You were created without purpose and intention.
And then Wes talks about the contrast of Genesis and the Bible.
And then you read Genesis chapter 1 and it says, in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. And he makes it good. And there's this idea that, like, that's countercultural in the idea that the Babylonians did not think that the world was good.
Wes then talks more about the Bible's teachings about humans being created in the image of God.
But that humanity in general is created in the image of God. And this idea of the imago Dei, that that's why you're different. Like, why are you different from all the animals?
Right.
Because you're given something that exemplifies a unique quality.
Then Wes talks about humans having a God-given purpose and how that contrasts with other ancient civilizations.
And it says that, no, there's purpose, there's meaning, there's intention. And actually, a lot of the things that you worship, it's pretty stupid because God created them.
Joe asks Wes what he thinks about ancient history as a Christian.
So as a Christian, what do you think about all this stuff? Like, what do you think about ancient hominids, Australopithecus, Neanderthals? Like, what was God up to with all this?
Wes answers by saying that he believes in intelligent design and God's role in creation.
I ultimately would be an advocate for intelligent design, where I would say that that God purposefully created humanity.
Wes then shares some questions about flaws in the theory of evolution.
Neo-Darwinian evolution is not quite explaining some of what's going on with things like the fossil record and some of the gaps that we have in there.
I think it's great that Wes isn't afraid to say what he believes regarding this subject area, where Christians are often mocked, when the reality is that what Christians believe actually has a lot of scientific support.
But ultimately, I would ascribe to there being an original Adam and Eve, and that those are our, like, if you want to call them like our first parents kind of thing. But
Wes talks about evidence that the Gospel of John was written much earlier than most people believe.
Wow.
Which means that at minimum, you've already pushed the Gospel of John back into the first century comfortably, and potentially even, like, most likely into the lifetime of the eyewitnesses of these events.
Wes also gave Joe some copies of biblical manuscripts that he made himself, and Joe was pretty amazed by what Wes said about them.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Wow. That's so fascinating.
So this is the kind of work that I do in terms of trying to figure out, okay, you have these fragments.
God, it's so beautiful. It's just so bizarre to imagine these people writing this stuff down so long ago.
Wes then talks about God creating the universe, and interestingly, Joe seems to agree with him about at least part of this.
Yeah.
And I say, well, if the first miracle happened, if everything, nothing became everything,
Right.
then, Jesus turning water into wine.
That's an easy one.
Well, yeah.
That's a party trick.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is nothing compared to the birth of the universe, but
Joe seems kind of open to the idea that God may have created the universe.
we're convinced at the creation of the universe, and we're very skeptical at other miracles. It's very odd.
Joe himself even starts asking some questions about evolution here.
If evolution is the only thing that created us, it's just evolution, how the did we get so far ahead of everybody else?
Joe then even refers to the creation of the universe as a miracle.
But at the end of the day, you have one miracle. You have the Big Bang. All of science agrees this happened.
Joe then continues talking about miracles.
Like the whole idea that Christianity, when you're saying that the book of, was it the book of Isaiah?
Yeah.
That the same book is exactly the same as, like, that's a miracle.
Wes then shares more about what Christianity teaches.
The crazy thing about Christianity, where you have this Jewish itinerant guy who's walking around first century Roman occupied Judea. He's making some pretty audacious claims to be God himself. And then he predicts his own death and resurrection.
Yeah.
And then they go from 11 as scared men in an upper room to completely overhauling the Roman world in only a couple hundred years.
And Wes goes on to talk more about the resurrection of Jesus.
Because of this claim that they say they saw Jesus resurrected. Like, there's something different that goes on there, that they're like, this is a miracle, right? Dead people don't usually rise from the dead.
Joe then directly asks Wes what he believes about Jesus' resurrection.
So what is your personal belief when it comes to the resurrection? What do you think happened? Do you have a belief?
And Wes answers honestly.
As a historian, I do think it is a historical question. You have a guy who objectively lived, he objectively died, and then individuals close to his inner circle claim that they see him not dead.
Right.
Again.
This is a highly unusual activity.
Joe then says that it's really difficult for people like him to believe in the resurrection.
It's very difficult for anybody who thinks of themselves as an intelligent person who's secular to even entertain the possibility that someone died and come back to life.
And here's how Wes responds to that.
And I get that. But we've already talked about the fact that we don't think that the only thing that exists is matter and motion. We as in you and I, right? Like, we believe that there's something else going on in this world that's a little bit crazy.
There's something else.
And that to, I think, exclude that, I think excludes something that you're kind of putting blinders on.
Wes then talks about the historical evidence for the resurrection.
But the Gospels are written in the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. And they're written in this period of time where you have groups of individuals who could have fact-checked those things.
Joe then asks if it's possible that Jesus didn't die at all.
Do you think it's possible that he didn't die? And do you think it's possible that they thought he was dead?
And here was Wes's answer to Joe's question.
If you look at, say, very skeptical biblical scholars, like non-believing, atheist, agnostic Christian scholars, they will say if we can know anything about Jesus, they'll say one thing we can be sure of is that he died by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate.
Joe continues asking questions about the evidence for Jesus' resurrection.
How many different people have some sort of a recollection or a writing or something that's attributed to them of being witness to his resurrection?
And here's how Wes responded to that.
Well, you have Peter, Paul, Jude, James, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
And here's Wes talking about just how much information we have about Jesus.
The interesting thing about Jesus is that we have more evidence from different writings in the ancient world than we probably should have for someone of his stature.
Wes then asks a question that was actually really significant in bringing me to faith in Jesus Christ.
How do you explain it going from 11 scared disciples in an upper room to being willing to go out and die for the proclamation that you believe that Jesus rose from the dead, and you saw him, and you touched him, and you ate with him?
And after Wes presents some more information, Joe seems pretty floored by what he just heard.
Consider how difficult it would be for someone living outside of the locations and times that these events took place to get the right names with the right qualifiers. We have 4 biblical gospels with 4 different authors, and yet each gets this test of naming frequency and attribution right every time. A test and standard that the non-biblical gospels simply do not pass.
That's interesting.
So we can use
that is so interesting,
isn't it? So
that's so interesting. It totally makes sense too.
Joe then criticizes atheism and marvels at the idea of existing at all.
The worst versions of them are essentially believers in the religion of atheism.
Right.
They worship the concept of there being no God, and this is it. When you die, nothing happens.
Yeah.
And that to me is always so arrogant. Just the fact that you exist at all is so bizarre and so spectacular.
Joe also asks a very significant question about the difference between humans and animals.
Why? Why is our version of life so much more rich and complicated than any other being that exists? And why do we have this insatiable desire to learn and know more?
And here's how Wes answered.
In all of this, what do you think of Jesus? What do you think of the historical person of Jesus?
Joe ultimately said that he doesn't know, but that it's a fascinating question to ponder.
Well, it certainly seems like there's a lot of people that believe that there was this very exceptional human being that existed. So the question is, what does that mean? Does it mean he was the Son of God? Does it mean he was just some completely unique human being that had this vision of humanity?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what does it mean? It's just the fact that it's a question to ponder is a miracle in itself, in a way.
Joe then talks about how powerful the Christian message is.
It's the fact that there's this concept of this person that died for our sins, that's the Son of God, but you have to you have to believe in a bunch of stuff to go that way. Like, just the concept of that is interesting to people, because what it can do to people is offer them a very unique way to change the way they feel about the world itself.
Joe also talks about the benefits of the Christian life.
If you do live like a Christian and you do follow the principles of Christ, you will have a richer, more love-filled life. So it is true, right?
Wes also points out that he disagrees with Jordan Peterson's view of Jesus.
I think I really like the way that Jordan Peterson articulates it, but I think he misses the forest for the trees.
How so?
In that he sees Jesus as an archetype. And I don't think actually even Jesus gives you the opportunity to see him as the archetype.
Wes then says something that causes Joe to ask a very important question.
Because Jesus was very against moralism.
And how do you define Jesus being against moralism? Like, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, Jesus looks at the religiosity of his day and he's constantly critiquing the fact that they have this hypocritical religiosity to them.
And here's how Wes answered that question.
You can't do enough to actually live up to the standard that God holds you to. And so if you keep striving, you're actually going to wear yourself out and be exhausted.
Like atheists. The Book of Enoch, which was one of the original biblical texts that wasn't included in the canon, but just because of a few rabbis decided it didn't jive with the Torah. And they found the Book of Enoch along with the Book of Isaiah as a part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And when you find out that there was a biblical text that was contemporary to books that did make it into the Old Testament, and that they talk about the Watchers who come from above and mate with humans and create this race of giants called the Nephilim who destroy everything and consume everything. And you're like, what the fuck is this? Like, what is this? And just stop and imagine if those rabbis hadn't if that hadn't been excluded. Like Wesley Huff is great talking about this stuff. He's a real historian when it comes to, really understanding the history of these biblical texts, and he's absolutely fascinated by it. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of crazy that they just decided to not put that in the Bible. Imagine if they did. And part of when you're going to church and they're going over the Old Testament, like, okay, this week we're going to go over the Book of Enoch, and we're going to figure out who the Watchers are. Like, what is that? Like, what is that story? The crazy thing that Wes Huff told me was that the book of Isaiah that they found in the Dead Sea Scroll predates the oldest version of the book of Isaiah by more than 1,000 years. Whoa.
When they found it, they found out that there was a book of Isaiah that is 1,000 years older than the one they thought was the oldest one, and it is verbatim. It's verbatim from the one that's 1,000 years later.
Wow.
Which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
But then it's also in the same fucking caves as the Book of Enoch. It's all together there in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Amazing. I mean, we've been fed this story that sort of all of these religions and myths from the past are all just false.
Right.
They're all just hallucinations.
Right.
They're all just lies.
I don't believe that.
It's just really arrogant, actually. Like, it's like, well, no, now, like, we've been around for, humans have been around for like millions of years, but the last 150 years is like we really figured it all out, and we figured out that all human knowledge before, whatever, some recent time period is nonsense. Yeah, I think that's quite arrogant.
It's very arrogant, but I'm a believer that history is far older than we think it is. And I think the more time goes on, the more that gets revealed. So when you're talking about something that's 4,000 or 5,000 years old, I think really you're talking about a retelling of a far older story. And I think it's very difficult when you're dealing with people that don't have an understanding of science. The written language is fairly new. It's an oral tradition for generations before it's ever written down. So my question with all of this is always like, what were they trying to talk about? What were they trying to say? What was the original experience that someone documented in story? And then that story was relayed over and over and over again, generation after generation, until it's eventually written down, and then they study it and take it literally. And then also translating it from Aramaic, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient Hebrew, all these different languages, to Latin and Greek and eventually English. But what's the original story? Like, what are they trying to document? What is this important knowledge that they want to share? And how screwed up would that get over the generations and generations of talking about it? But what ultimate truth is in there? Like, I'm absolutely fascinated by the story of Jesus Christ. Because if you wanted to come up with a way that people would live that would absolutely be far more beneficial than just going on natural instincts and tribal behavior, and you would follow Jesus' teachings. Like, I can't find a flaw in the way he tells you to live life. There's a lot of religions that involve, torturing non-believers and raping infidels and being able to do terrible things to the people that don't believe your religion. There's none of that in Christianity. It's all forgiveness. It's all treating your brother and your neighbor as if they're you.
Like it's a beautiful way to live life.
Are you Christian?
Well, I go to church, and I have been for quite a while.
Okay, so
I've been doing it for the last 3 or 4 years.
But that's not really an answer to the question.
Well, because I don't know. I think it's very interesting, and I do believe that if you follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, you will live a better life. I really do believe that. And one of the things I talk about is like, the people that I go to church with are the most fucking polite people I've ever met in my life. They're so kind and so nice, and everybody lets you out of the parking lot. Everybody's like, you go, you go. It's like like it works. You know what I'm saying? Like if people are trying to find an idea, does that mean I believe people came back from the dead? Does that mean I believe Moses parted the Red Sea? Not really. No, it seems like that's most likely a story where people are telling it generation after generation after generation, but there's probably something happening. There's probably some truth to it. Then when you take into account some of the stories from the Old Testament, like the Book of Ezekiel, which I'm absolutely fascinated by. The Book of Ezekiel and his account of the wheel within a wheel and the fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were gleaming metal. Like, what the hell is that? Like, what is that? Like, what are these stories? And in the midst of this gleaming metal, there's the likeness of 4 living creatures. Like, okay, they darted to and fro like the appearance of a flash of lightning. Okay, what is that? Like, what were they trying to say? And what was the original experience that people documented that was so important?
And it might have been a lot more similar to these UFO experiences.
That's the
point. We've been seeing. Yeah,
and I think this is one of the things that Tucker goes back to.
The Christian story is so beautiful and so important. You know, Rene Girard's view of Christianity as really stopping the cycle of scapegoating. You know, scapegoating where, and I'm seeing it right now as part of the reason we've been pushing back against the moral panic on Epstein, is that you scapegoat the thing. You know, traditionally it literally was a goat, but you scapegoat the person or whatever.
Wait a minute, originally it was a goat?
It really was a goat, yeah. It really was a goat, yeah. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it would carry the sins of the community.
Oh, you sacrifice
and
the goat?
I think you would send it away to die or something.
Oh.
But over time it became
that's what
people.
A scapegoat was?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then,
it's always a goat.
But generally
goats are the devil. Goats are everything.
Oh,
goats get a bad rap.
Goats are in your lobby, aren't they? Or those are elk. No, in your
those
lobby.
Are elk.
Okay.
No, there's a big difference.
Yeah, but I mean, so Christianity puts an end to that. It says stop scapegoating. I mean, they scapegoated Jesus, really. I mean, you kind of go, you scapegoat the purpose of the scapegoating was for the community to unite the community and scapegoat to put all of its sins on one thing and then kill it or get rid of it, and that was the way the community would restore unity. Christianity said no, we're not going to do it that way. That's immoral, and so he without sin should be the first to cast a stone. Jesus wasn't saying that prostitution was good or anything. He was saying that we should not be scapegoating, you've got sins too, so don't scapegoat this person. That's a really radical moment in human history, and it really is what allowed humans to spread. It creates a universal, Christianity is the first universal, it's really a universal religion. Maybe it's not the only, but it's a universal religion. It says everybody, is a child of God, and it's evangelical, and it wants other people to become Christian. That's different from other religions where I'm like, this is my God, I've got my own God here, and we're the best, and you suck, and
they make it very difficult to join.
Yeah, and it's not to say that Christians, obviously there was, fighting the Muslims, and there's some interesting revisionism there, but it's a beautiful religion.
There's terrible things that have been done under the guise of Christianity, but if you listen to the teachings of Jesus Christ, they're not following his teachings. So it's just human behavior that they have tagged on to Christianity. So when people say Christianity is responsible for horrible atrocities, I say no. I say humans are. Because if it was actually Christianity, you would be following the teachings of Christ, and there would be none of those things.
Anti-Semitism is not Christian.
Right.
So
right.
True Christianity is not that. So I think it's lovely, and I hope there's a revival of some of it. I'm not sure there is.
I think there is more now than before. There's a lot of young people that are getting into Christianity.
I think it's good to. I think it's also. It's interesting with we were talking about the UFO thing. It's an awareness that there's a higher power. So one can sort of say, look, the UFO thing, it's not the same as Christianity or whatever. But this awareness that we're not. There's something else going on. There's something more. There's something higher than us, and that we should be humble in the face of this just gigantic mystery. I think that puts us in a better mentality.
It certainly does. And if anything, if he's not the Son of God, if this was an actual historical figure, what an insanely wise human being who didn't have these thoughts that are inherent to all of us of vengeance and lust and greed. Has none of these.
So radical. Also, you've heard it said before that you should, love your friends and hate your enemies. I say to you, you should love your enemies. I mean, that's just, it's like the hardest. I'm not there. I think very few people are there, but it's certainly the right aspiration, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the right aspiration. And Tucker thinks that this whole UFO thing is somehow connected to the spiritual realm.
I got off on a giant kick one time reading about giant. And it's like anytime the Smithsonian got involved, it was just shut down.
Yeah. The giant stuff is weird because there's a lot of documentation of people finding giants, like enormous
giant bones,
10, 15-foot tall humans. And then there's also the Nephilim in the Bible that are giants that consumed everything. David and Goliath. There's giants in the Bible. And it makes you think, like, okay, is it a giant like the mountain from the Game of Thrones?
Just a big
that's
guy.
Maybe.
Because people were shorter and relatively back then.
Right, but probably some people weren't if they lived in some places where they had more resources and better genes. Yeah.
Pituitary gland problems, where we have guys 7'11" plus,
Yep, but this seems different. The giants in the Bible and the giants in historical accounts, it seems different. It seems like it's a totally different species of human. And again, if we just found this guy recently that's 1 million years old, and now we know. So forever they were saying that human beings, the timeline used to be Homo sapiens emerged 50,000 years ago, and then they moved it to 150, then they moved it to 250, 300, as they find more information. Now they have to push it to 1 million. And if one day they find a fucking head as big as this table, like, what do they do? What do they do about that? Do they even tell us?
I don't think they would.
I don't think we would.
But why wouldn't they? That's what's weird. Why wouldn't they? Isn't that crazy? But we all agree. We all agree that if they did find a giant, they probably wouldn't tell us.
Yeah.
Not until they did their own, figured it out for themselves or tested on what they want.
No, if they want people to know, but I don't know why they wouldn't want people to know. Like, why am I convinced that they would hide that?
Well, if there is Antichrist on his way, and his goal, he already knows he lost. So his goal at this point is just to destroy as much as possible, get as many souls as possible. And finding stuff like that would prove the Bible more true would turn more people to Christianity or to God, the one true God. Then I could see where if there is like some type of spiritual force that is in somewhat control, then I could see that's the only way I can make sense of it. Is like, why cover up progress? Why not tell people the truth? Because
I think it's ego, and that might be also related to good and evil in a lot of ways.
Loving yourself, and you're supposed to love God over yourself.
Right, and being the person that has the knowledge and the person that distributes that knowledge and is the gatekeeper of it is a very intoxicating thing for a lot of these academics. And if all of a sudden something comes along and this is the speculation about what happened with the Smithsonian, that they took that stuff and just fucking tucked it away.
I would think they
femur bones.
They would want to have, secretly do their own test without anybody knowing about it.
I know, but to what end? At what point in time?
Before everybody else knows, they would already have the answers. I don't know.
But wouldn't there be a time where someone would want to be the guy who discovered it all and get all the credit for it? Like, that's why it doesn't make sense.
To me, if somebody knows God, it is freeing in a lot of way, and you realize that, no government is above you or no man is above you. God is above you, and you serve God. And if you can keep people away from God, you're that much more susceptible to being a slave to something else and worshiping something else.
Whatever evidence or anything that kind of proves that God exists.
Yeah, anything that's going to prove God's existence, I think that's going to be the main thing they shut down.
Right. Like, the Shroud of Turin is an excellent example.
Yeah,
that one's an interesting
wild.
one.
That's a weird one, man. There's a weird one. There's a lot of people that go out of their way to try to disprove it, But when you get into the dating of the cloth, so it used to be they were saying that it was only a few hundred years old, but now they're saying that the way the cloth is made, the cloth is made that's exactly consistent with the time that Jesus was alive, and that more tests need to be done to find out the exact age of it, because the problem is like you don't know like what piece they studied, and you're not studying the entire thing, and also the image of it is bizarre. Because the image of it, you really only see Jesus when it's a negative of it. And they don't know how that image was put on there. It wasn't stained. It wasn't burned on there. They don't know what caused it.
It's like a blast of radiation.
Yes,
right.
Somebody recreated it with gamma radiation, I think. But the only problem, so it would just be, it would need to be an extreme source of light to do that. But the only problem is that would have vaporized, the heat from the light would have vaporized it realistically. So they're wondering, well, if light did do it, how was there no heat?
Right.
So if Christ did raise and pass through it, there's also X-ray images in the shroud, apparently.
Well, you see this when you see the shroud in negative. Like, Jamie, pull up an image of it. It's very strange. Like, it shows the lash marks on his body.
Yeah.
It shows his facial features. It shows the holes where his wrist is, where he was crucified. It's very strange stuff. Because, like, for someone to do that as a hoax and to just not paint it, to do it in some very weird. Go to that. Yeah, that one right where your cursors are over that. Make that big.
Recently said it's fake.
They've recently said it's fake?
They go back and forth on it.
The thing is, like, who is the person who's they, right?
Yeah.
The Catholic Church is who
What's that,
owns
Jamie?
it.
Says they've been debunking it for 650 years.
Well, but 650 years ago, they didn't even have carbon dating. So what were they doing to debunk it back then?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people that want to debunk it.
It says there's a
So what does
document
it
they
say?
found.
A document?
Well, they were talking. I mean, I don't know.
Where they talked about it being bullshit?
Yeah, I've
The
also
thing is,
seen
people,
videos-
I'm sure, called bullshit on it
I've
a
seen
long
videos
time
where
ago.
People have talked about ways that some of that stuff could have been done.
Sure, but how would someone figure out that 500, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, whatever it is?
It could have been 300, 200, 150,
Sure.
60 years ago.
Well, it's 650 years. If they've been debunking it for 650 years, you got to assume it's at least 650 years old.
Well,
so the thing is, like, see, it's been dated between 1355 and 1382.
The text was the document.
The text, what text?
That we're talking about here, not the shroud.
What is the text about? Medieval document has revealed that the authenticity of the shroud that many believe wrapped and crucified was being called into question perhaps as early as 1355. Okay, well, that means that it existed 1355.
Yeah.
Depictions by clergymen. See, it's hard. Deceptions. Oh, excuse me. Deceptions by clergymen. His writings, now considered the oldest written rejection of the relic, predate the previous earliest documented criticism by the Bishop of Troyes, Pierre d'Arcis, in 1389. So either way, we know it's at least 600 plus years old, and we know that the way that it was put on there was not stained, it was not painted. It's very strange. And if you look at it like that, they didn't even know that until they came up with photography, until they could take an image of it and make it a negative. They didn't see the face of Jesus and all the depictions.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this image right here is like, you look at that, the Shroud of Turin, you're like, yeah, I could say call bullshit, whatever. But then you see the negative, like, go back to those other images. So this is what it looks like when you run it through, when you use modern photography and turn it into a negative. That's really weird that this wasn't, that they didn't know about this in the 1300s.
Yeah.
A new study says it's something else. So they're going to have studies forever that debunk it. And one thing that academics love to do, they love to call everybody retarded.
Yep.
Everybody's an idiot. This is all fake. This is bullshit. But whatever that is, man, when you're just go back to the negative ones. The one that you just had. The one down. Right, yeah, that one, please. That's weird as fuck to me, man. That's weird as fuck that you couldn't see it normally, and you only see it when they make a negative of it. That is so strange that someone would go out of their way to fake something in that way, where it only exists in a negative.
Well,
I'm
they
not
don't even
saying
know how it happened.
Right, exactly. They don't know how to. I mean, they're saying they could reproduce it today, but I don't think anybody has. And also, how are you going to reproduce it to such an extent with so much detail that matches the biblical depiction of the crucifixion?
Yeah.
Including the holes in the wrist, the lash marks on his back, the wound in his side. It's all really weird. At the very least, it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really interesting stuff.
To me, that seeing that, I really don't even care how old people think it is, or like figure out how they did that first. To me, it's like if this is
not only that, how'd they do that 600 fucking years ago, or 2,000 years ago, or whatever age it actually is.
I seen one article last year where they found dirt particles that matched, that trace back to Jerusalem. So
yeah,
it's. Like I say, they've been debunking it and saying it's authentic and debunking it. It seems like for the last 5 or 10 years now.
Oh, it's very weird stuff.
It's just where are we at right now with it?
That one church in Ethiopia that's supposed to have the Ark of the Covenant there.
Yeah.
And all the people that guard it, they all get cataracts and they wind up dying of radiation.
I haven't heard that one.
You ever heard of that?
I don't know about that, because the Ark of the Covenant was when God the Father's presence was here on earth, not through Jesus. Old Testament, the I Am was down here, and that's what he resided in. And you had to do all these things to be in his presence, or you would literally just die because, he's holy. And to me, it's like lightness and dark cannot exist in the same place. So whatever. But God the Father's presence isn't there anymore, so I don't understand why it would still be messing people up.
Well, we don't know what they were writing down, right?
Yeah.
The problem with all ancient religious texts, let's assuming there was real events.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is a lot of these things were told as an oral tradition for 100, 500, 1,000 years before they're ever even written down. And then they write them down. They write them down in Aramaic. They write them down in Hebrew. They write them, and then they have to translate it. And they translate it to Greek and Latin, and then eventually English. You're missing a lot along the way. When I read these things, when I read the Bible, or if I read the Book of Enoch, or any of these ancient texts, I'm always trying to say, okay, what were they trying to document?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was the original event? Like, what actually happened? And the problem is people are really bad at telling the truth. Like, human beings, when they see something fantastic, they always add their own little flavor to it. People add their own little thing to it. If they are of a certain belief, they're going to attach that belief to whatever this thing was. So it's no question that these people held whatever that was in such high regard, and it meant so much to them that they, like the book of Isaiah, where it's verbatim, that they wrote it verbatim for 1,000 years. Back when they started out, they were writing things down on animal skins.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things about the Dead Sea Scrolls that's so fascinating, is they had to do genetic testing. So they're writing these things down on these animal skins, and they had to make sure that the skin of this one is the same cow as the skin of this one. So if they do like genetic testing to make sure it's the same cow skin. So, okay, we got all the skin from this cow, and it's in this group of text, so start decoding it.
That's an interesting way of doing it. That's wild.
Yeah. It's wild.
I would have never thought of that.
And like Wes Huff said, how they used to write things, like they'd leave stuff out back then because it wasn't required back then. They would just write down the basics. I watched that Wes Huff thing, and that was very interesting.
He's fascinating.
He's brilliant, man.
Yeah.
I've watched a bunch of stuff on him.
Very
learned
brilliant. But it's again, what were they trying to document?
Yeah.
There's clearly something was going on back then. Something happened.
Did you ever read that story? It was somewhere in the Bible. I can't remember where. It's in the Old Testament. Somebody stole the ark. Well, some tribe stole the ark, and like the next day, the next morning, like everybody was dead from stealing the ark, and they pretty much said, "Hey, come get this thing, take it back."
Yeah, we don't want it. We're good.
Well, that's what people believe is in this church in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Because there's these Ethiopian Jews who also, their Bible is the Book of Enoch.
Yeah.
Do we have an image of this ark?
No, you can't see it. Nobody can get. I say send in the SEALs. We need to fucking
SEAL Team 6
find out what the fuck is in there, bro. Put these guys in hazmat suits and Let's
If
get
the
to
U.S.
the bottom
knows
of
you
this.
got it, it's going to be ours.
Well, yeah, you would imagine.
We're going to take it.
I would
Or
like
they
to
might
see
not
what,
know at all.
Well, what would happen with remote viewers if remote viewing is real? Get remote
Oh,
viewers in a
man.
room, and
We have talked.
Yes, I mean, it also goes back to the Enlightenment, to the idea that God doesn't exist, and the idea that the human being is the measure of all things. Well, if the human being is the measure of all things, what does that mean? Our reason, and our reason is completely flawed. All of us do things every day which are unreasonable, sinful, wrong, and absurd. Right? And the reasonable person says, wait a second, why did I do that? What do I have to refer to in my confusion and my self-loathing? Well, the Bible was a pretty good bet, for the Hebrew Bible for 6,000 years, right? The Christian Bible for 2,000 is a pretty good bet. Say, wait a second, let's talk about human nature. You really aren't that smart. You really aren't in charge of the world. You really aren't. Although you think you are, you think that because you're human. But God's in charge of the world, and there's a certain way things are. And if you'd like to get out of your wretched self-consciousness and self-delusion, you better get your ass into church.
But don't you think that, when atheists talk about religion and they criticize organized religion and criticize the Bible, they talk about things that are in the Bible that seem preposterous, right? They talk about people rising from the dead and walking on water, particularly the Old Testament, right? Like, to use that as a guidebook for life, you have to kind of ignore some of the stuff that doesn't make sense.
Well,
don't you think?
The Bible's a myth. Okay, the Bible, right, especially the Christian Bible, comes out of the Jewish Bible. It's a retelling of the story in a different way. But the Jewish Bible is a myth, and the myth is the myth of creation and the myth of human experience. So what it does is, chapter by chapter, story by story, it challenges us with disturbing and bizarre images, and it says, why don't you try to understand this? See if you can understand this. What does it really mean to escape from Egypt? Does it mean escaping from your inner Pharaoh? What does it really mean to part the Red Sea? So these stories are told, any myth is a dramatic retelling of an underlying reality that can't be expressed rationally. Right? So the atheists say everything can be expressed rationally. For example, you know that the earth is burning up. You can tell that because sometimes things get warmer and sometimes things get colder. You can also tell that when things get colder, that's obviously because the earth is burning up, because the sun is melting the glaciers and the glaciers are raising the temperature. You can also tell, of course, that to be fair to everyone, children change sex. You know that, don't you? And you can tell that men can compete as women and women compete as men. This is all human confusion because we trust our senses and we trust our mind, and the mind it doesn't work real good. We're very cunning, but we aren't very smart, human beings. And that's the message of the Bible. And so if you look at Moses, the Egyptians tried to kill him all of his life. The Egyptians tried to kill him. He didn't have any trouble with the Egyptians because God was on his side. He had trouble with the Jews because the Jews were always saying, who the hell do you think you are? So the Old Testament is the story of atheists, really, saying, who the hell do you think you are?
So when you're talking about the Bible, right? And the lessons in the Bible, isn't part of the problem is that people translated it from ancient Hebrew to Latin to Greek and all these other languages, and then eventually to English. Like, a lot's lost along the way, right? And a lot is open to interpretation. Like, a lot of what we're talking about in these myths and stories that people take as factual occurrences, they probably were there's some sort of a lesson in the myth, some sort of allegory. There's things about these stories that probably have hints of truth. But isn't it hard to kind of decipher it all if you can't speak the mother language?
That's a very good question. So I want to first let me ask you. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. Okay.
Okay.
These two octopuses walk into a laundromat.
Okay.
See, that's what a myth is. I said 2 octopuses walk into a laundromat, and you didn't say, wait a second, octopuses can't walk and they wouldn't be in a laundromat.
Well, I thought about it, but I'm being polite.
So what you said is, yeah, tell me more. Okay.
Well, I'm hoping it's a good joke.
Okay, well, I'll get to that. But it's the same thing with the Bible is really 2 octopuses walk into a laundromat. So I'm going to tell you a story. I want you to suspend your disbelief because there's something in this story you might get a kick out of. There might be some wisdom in it. There might yes and might no. But if you listen as you would to a story, which the Bible is, it's a myth, rather than to a factual retelling, you might get a kick out of it. Now, as far as a translation goes, I can read the Bible in Hebrew. I started learning when I was 40. It's easy language. And there are a lot of mistranslations. But the main point is not the mistranslations, because there are some pretty good English translations too. But the main point is saying that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.
So what do you think the Bible is? Do you think the Bible is a bunch of very wise people got together and they formed these stories to sort of illustrate the folly of mankind and how one needs to have like a moral compass and guiding principles that are set in stone, and that you have these rules to live your life in a moral and just way, and that'll make for a better society? Like, what do you think the Bible actually is?
Well, a friend of mine, a rabbi, was a Reform rabbi, was applying to get into an Orthodox yeshiva, an Orthodox college, and he's a Reform rabbi. So the guy says, you have very good credentials and you're very well learned. Do you think the Bible is literally the work of God? The rabbi says, no. So the guy says, well, is it possible? The rabbi says, yes. The guy says, okay, you're in. Right? So there's Dennis Prager, who I'm crazy about, said the other day, he said, I don't believe in the Torah, the Jewish Bible, because of God. He said, I believe in God because of the Torah. So if you read the Torah, the Jewish Bible, and the Christian Bible is just an extension of that, you say, my God, this is incredible wisdom. This goes back to the beginning of time. People who've tried to figure out everything. And
Right.
they didn't have the language that we have, but they had the language that they had. And this was thousands of years of experience progressed and compressed into a myth. So we know that this is true because liberals have always been in love with the myths, especially Jews, with the myths of other cultures, right? We say how beautiful it is that this culture has that myth, that the Haida Indians say the world was formed by a large beaver, and when the beaver slapped his tail like that, it made the oceans, and when the blah, blah, blah. It's a gorgeous myth. Mm-hmm. Nobody says of that myth, wait a second, you can't have a beaver that big, right?
That's what I would say.
Yeah, okay.
I would step in and go, hey, man. So this is kind of crazy. We didn't know they could do that back then.
Well, before coming out here, I asked ChatGPT, how old are some of the stories written down in the text in the Hebrew Bible? And at least according to ChatGPT, it's 10,000 years ago. So
oh my God,
something may have happened at that time. That
makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very interesting finding. Oh, Sodom and Gomorrah. That's a great story. I'm working on this translation of the Hebrew Bible. I've got a Substack now. I've been putting out things every week, a chapter a week.
Yeah.
On my translation of the Bible, it's like 1,000 pages right now of commentary about the language and the grammar, the meaning, what's called the plain meaning of the text. Like there was a Noah with 3 sons and went on the ark. Yeah, so that's like my big project, but I'd like to do a smaller one about Sodom and Gomorrah and the figure of Lot. I think that's a really incredible story.
Mm.
I've spent about maybe 2 to 3 weeks looking at that, Lot, his virgin daughters, the men circling his house, they're asking to know him. He ends up, in a cave with his 2 virgin daughters. They get him drunk, and he sleeps with them. Or they lie with him anyway. Yeah, and out come 2 kids at a certain point, and they become very important. Later on, they're the beginning of the Messianic line. So it's a very intricate, tale with I think you can make some cool conversations between some of the main personages in the the narrative. There was a book called The Red Tent.
Can I ask you about the lot? Like, how old was that story?
Wow, that must be, well, it's an explanation of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is the around the Dead Sea. There was a conflagration of some sort there. Have any of your guests spoken about Sodom? What actually happened around the Dead Sea? It was quite catastrophic.
Well, tell us.
Well, the story of Lot. Yeah, I mean there was fire and sulfur pouring down on Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah, it was the end of the plain. Yeah, so that's the southern part of the Dead Sea. It is a Dead Sea because of its high salt concentrations. It was kind of closed off from the coast. So it's at least a description of what took place.
What do you think it's describing?
Well, I mean, my perspective is
a volcano.
It actually happened. Yeah, but people think a volcano, some kind of volcanic activity.
It totally sounds like a volcano, right? And we know that there's been a bunch of those that have almost wiped people out entirely at certain points. The Toba volcano, that one?
No.
We got down to, I think we've looked this up before, but I want to say they think we might have gotten down to just a few thousand people.
On the whole planet?
Like 70,000 years ago. 70,000 years ago, there was a massive super volcano that went off, and it, plunged the Earth probably into nuclear winter. And they think that our genetic line entirely of the human race on Earth came from this few thousand survivors.
Joe, can we take a
yes.
a break?
You gotta pee?
Yeah.
Yes. We'll be right back, folks.
Seriously.
We're back.
Yeah, so we were talking about the alternative.
Yes. Explain what you mean by that. Like that these things are happening in an alternative dimension.
Right. Yeah, I think they're happening in an alternative dimension. Like when you smoke DMT, you return to the same place each time. So there seems to be some reality, some DMT world that people enter into. And it's one of my volunteers, one of the subjects in the DMT research. He got a big dose one day, and then a few months later, he got another big dose. And he said that it was very interesting. He said things have just continued apace since his first exposure and his first entrance into that state, and things had gone on in the meantime, and he re-entered that world. So in that way, there's in that same manner, the world of the Hebrew Bible early on, Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, Noah, the Tower of Babel, all that took place at some different level of reality, which gradually made its way into ours. And once it made its way into ours, there's the archaeological evidence, the first temple, second temple, and so on. So there is a transition between our world and that world kind of merged, but in the beginning, it was an alternative dimension. It's the same God, I think, but different dimensions.
So, is this your own personal conclusion?
Yeah. Wow. Well, when I was on the show last time, you're asking if I believe those things took place. And my answer then was, I take it as if it were true.
Right.
And then I started to think, how I would do that. Like, in what world would that be true? It'd be a different world.
Right. I feel like I've always believed that they were trying to record something. I just didn't always trust that human beings were completely honest with their recollection of events. So that there's something that they were trying to write down. But was it really coming from God? Are these accurate events? What exactly happened with Noah and the ark? Like what really happened?
Well, 3 stories. Three levels.
Mm-hmm.
2 of each, then 7 of one pair or 7 pairs of birds. Well, of every living thing.
Yeah, but like, how's he feeding them? Animals eat other animals. The whole thing's nuts. You would need a lot more rabbits. You need so many animals to keep just the lions alive.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. How's he getting them all from all over the world into his stupid boat?
Yeah.
There's so many things that are wrong.
Yeah.
But the story of him being told that some shit is about to go down, and you probably should, find some way to restart your version of civilization somewhere. There's probably multiple like the flood myth that we, whatever you want to call it, the stories of the flood that you get from Epic of Gilgamesh, that you get from Noah. It's not just those. There's many different cultures all throughout history have a flood story, right? So it's probably likely that some crazy shit went down.
There may have been, there most likely was a flood. So what do you learn from it? Like, how do you do better, or on what basis do you rebuild? So I think there's different models. The biblical one is interesting because it's lineage, from Adam to Noah,
right,
to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob and the tribes, and now.
So when you talk about things happening in an alternative dimension, like, is that what you think, like, the birth of mankind is as well, like Adam and Eve?
Well, I mean...
Pull this microphone up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It just has an impact.
Yeah. Well, the creation story. Man was created on the 6th day.
Right.
Along with mammals. Yeah, it's a cool story. It's stages. People say, well, 7 days, that's unlikely. Like that creation took place 7 times 24. I don't know, 148. Something like that. 148 hours, 168 hours. The whole world was created. But it's broken into stages. 7 stages. Which is one of the translations of the word that is usually translated day. It could also mean stage. It's the word yom. It can mean either a day, a period of time, a stage. So that's that's the answer that makes sense to me about the 7-day story of creation. Yeah. So man was created on the 6th day, and then was placed in the Garden of Eden, and those events took place. The stories themselves are just they're written down, and so people have been studying them for thousands of years.
Who do you think Lilith was?
No mention of Lilith in the Bible.
Really?
Yeah.
Where's the story of Lilith emerge?
Well, it comes from what's called midrash.
What's that?
Comes from a root, darash. It means to, explicate, to expand upon, to investigate. So what happened after Adam and Eve sinned? Did they have sex again? And they do have Cain and Abel and the ensuing stories. And then there's a third son, Shet, who is the inheritor of Adam's of his traits, his good traits and bad traits. He's like God as well. So there's a distinct lineage that is spelled out. Lilith was a demon. That she slept with Adam after the sin of eating from the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. So there's a story that built up around the biblical story that they were separated. Adam and Eve were separated for a long period. And so who was Adam sleeping with? Well, it was expanded in the Midrash that there was a demoness named Lilith who slept with Adam for a couple hundred years. And then Adam and Eve reconciled.
Whoa.
Yeah. So so Lilith she doesn't appear in the text of the Hebrew Bible as such. So nobody knows. There's a mythology that's grown around Lilith as well. Well, isn't there some festival, some music festival called the Lilith Festival?
Lilith Fair.
Yeah. That's named after the spirit or the demoness who's.
You sure it wasn't like a lady named Lilith that she came up with it? Are we sure?
It was her neighbor, Lilith Smith.
If categories dissolve, especially fundamental ones, the culture is dissolving because the culture is a structure of category. Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
Right.
So, and in fact, culture is a structure of category that we all share. So we see things the same way. Well, that's why we can talk. I mean, not exactly the same way, because then we'd have nothing to talk about. But roughly speaking, we have a bedrock of agreement. That's the Bible, by the way. So I just walked through the Museum of the Bible in Washington. That was very cool. It's a very cool museum.
So the structure, that's what the Bible
Yeah, it's what
provides.
I figured out. I just figured this out this week. So it was a cool thing to walk through because it's chronological. They have one floor which is the history of the Bible. But it's not exactly that. It's really what it is the history of the book. Now, in many ways, the first book was the Bible. I mean, literally, because at one point there was only one book. Like, as far as our Western culture is concerned, there was one book. And for a while, literally, there was only one book. And that book was the Bible. And then before it was the Bible, it was it was scrolls and it was writings on papyrus. But we were starting to aggregate written text together. And it went through all sorts of technological transformations, and then it became books that everybody could buy, the book everybody could buy, and the first one of those was the Bible. And then it became all sorts of books that everybody could buy. But all those books, in some sense, emerged out of that underlying book. And that book itself, the Bible isn't a book, it's a library. It's a collection of books. And so what I figured out was, partly because I was talking to my brother-in-law, Jim Keller, who's the world's greatest chip designer and has now designed a chip that's as powerful as the human brain, which is optimized for artificial intelligence learning, by the way. And so I talked to him about that. He said, "You heard of the internet?" I said, "Yeah, Jim, I've heard of the internet." He said, "This is way more revolutionary than that." So in any case, we were talking about meaning in text because we were talking about translation and the problem of understanding text. And Jim said, the meaning of words is coded in the relationship of the words to one another. And the postmodernists make that case, that all meaning is derived from the relationship between words. That's wrong because, well, what about rage? That's not words. And what about moving your hand? That's not words. So it's wrong, but part of it's right because the meaning we derive from the verbal domain is encoded in the relationship between words. So now then you think, well, let's think about the relationship between words. Well, some words are dependent on other words. Some ideas are dependent on other ideas. The more ideas are dependent on a given idea, the more fundamental that idea is. That's a definition of fundamental. So now imagine you have an aggregation of texts in a civilization. You say, which are the fundamental texts? And the answer is the texts upon which most other texts depend. And so you'd put Shakespeare way in there in English because so many texts are dependent on Shakespeare's literary revelations. And Milton would be in that category, and Dante would be in that category, at least in translation. Fundamental authors, part of the Western canon, not because of the arbitrary dictates of power, but because those texts influenced more other texts. And then you think about that as a hierarchy, okay, with the Bible at its base, which is certainly the case. Now imagine that's the entire corpus of linguistic production. all things considered. Now, how do you understand that? Like, literally, how do you understand that? The answer is you sample it by reading and listening to stories and listening to people talk. You sample that whole domain. You build a low-resolution representation of that inside you, and then you listen and see through that. And so it isn't that the Bible is true. It's that the Bible is the precondition for the manifestation of truth, which makes it way more true than just true. It's a whole different kind of true. And I think this is not only literally the case, factually, I think it can't be any other way. It's the only way we can solve the problem of perception.